A very good afternoon to one and all present here. On behalf of the Department of BME, in association with Center for Healthcare Technologies and IEEE Signal Processing Society Madras chapter, it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Hemalata K, Professor and Head Department of Biomedical Engineering at Barnariam Institute of Technology. Ma'am has joined us today to present a keynote talk on the role of computational physiology in modern healthcare as a part of a faculty development program on emerging trends in biomedical engineering research for Healthcare 4.0. Dr. Hemalata has 21 years of experience in teaching. She completed her BE in Instrumentation Control from Kalasalingam College of Engineering, Madurai Kamaraj University, 1995, and both MTech and PhD in the field of Biomedical Engineering from IIT Madras in 2012. In these 21 years of her journey in the field of biomedical engineering, Dr. Hemalata has published many papers in reputed journals and have worked in almost 6 engineering colleges. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shall I start the presentation, sir? Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, I'll share my screen and start my presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible, ma'am.
Okay. So, good afternoon to one and all present here. I would like to thank the organizers of this FDP event for inviting me to give this keynote address. So, my research field is computational physiology. Actually, this is a very potential field, but only few people are working in India. So, there are a lot of opportunities in this computational physiology field to explore further. I hope this will be a useful session for all the participants to pursue their PhD in this field. Okay. So today I am going to talk about a little bit about computational physiology because it is a vast field. I cannot give a clear information throughout the information about the computational physiology. I'll try to give some abstract information about this field. So I organized today's presentation in this way: introduction about computational physiology and why computational models are very, very essential for diagnosing and therapeutic field of healthcare, and what are all the different classifications of computational methods available, and how we can represent analogous systems like respiratory system, cardiovascular system, and nervous system, how we can come up with a common platform to introduce all these systems in a single platform, and what are all the stages for developing this mathematical modeling. It has some systematic procedure. We have to approach the problem in this way only. So I will discuss what are all the stages related to mathematical modeling. And next one, I will take one sample of a cardiovascular system model, how it is developed, how it works, how it can be validated. So those steps I want to discuss with you with an example, which is a model developed by myself, and how this model can be utilized for healthcare applications. That is what my closing note. So we'll go for the introduction. So actually the computational physiology, there are a lot of computational procedures available in healthcare. So in modern field, this AI, ML and deep learning, everything are called as computational methodologies only. But here I am going to focus only about the physiology. So physiology, so all the AI, ML, DL are about the application field, but this is for exploring the fundamentals of physiology. So by knowing the physiology only, we can develop lot of diagnostic and therapeutic procedure. So still this physiology field is having some gray areas which has to be explored further. So this computational physiological models are very well useful for exploring the gray area in the physiology. Usually the physiology will be studied or past studied only with the experimental procedures. They will use animal models and they will create some diseases with that animal model, and by studying that animal model response only, they are exploring the physiology. Otherwise, anatomical part of the part of this one can be identified or can be studied with cadavers, but it is not possible with cadavers with studying the physiology, because physiology is something related to different organ functions. So we need a live samples. So for that, the people are going with animal models. So this animal model is also having certain disadvantages, because they are not completely mimicking the human physiology. So at that time, the modeling concept has been introduced. So in this model, we can develop mathematical equations which can mimic the exact physiology of any organ, whether it is belonging to human or animals. So in that way, to understand the physiology, computational models are very, very essential. So computational physiology is nothing but mathematical models which serves the purpose of understanding the physiology. Okay, so this is a major function of human body can be studied with the computational physiology. So after developing the mathematical equations, we are trying to solve that equations using different methodologies. Particularly, very useful methodology is numerical solutions for finding that equations. Okay, so with that solving that equation with numerical methods, we can generate different physiological parameters which can be which we can observe from a live human being or animals. That is the simulated results. So then we have to validate that results in order to understand the physiology. So this computational physiology is nothing but we are going to develop a model. The model has the capacity of simulating any diseases, and it integrates the information about the level of cells to tissue, tissue to organ, organ to organ system. If we consider our body, human body as a whole system, it consists of lot of subsystems. The subsystems are called as organ systems. For example, our body has cardiovascular system, respiratory system, neural system. So these are all called as organ system. If we consider our each and every system, it has some organs. So the organ functions are very important to understand in order to come up with the conclusion of the whole organ system. Okay, so this is the fundamental about the computational physiology. So I already explained to you, computational physiology is nothing but the mathematical models which are used for understanding the physiology of any organ or organ system. Okay, so in that one we are trying to write the mathematical equations for real-time problems. By solving that equations only, we are going to understand the whole system. Okay. So these are the basics about general explanation about the mathematical models. Why we are going for mathematical model? What are the needs of using this mathematical models? I already told you for understanding the physiology, people always go for animal models. So in that animal models also, we cannot perform any kind of experiments. There is a ethical issues. So in order to perform unethical experiments, this mathematical model is nothing but an algorithm or a program. So we can do any kind of experiments with this mathematical models. So we can perform even unethical experiments with this one. So in that way, they are very useful. And next one is very important one is intermediate variables. We can consider the whole system as a single system which consists of lot of subsystems. Suppose if we are studying the cardiovascular physiology, means we have certain measurement indices like heart rate, cardiac output, stroke volume. So these are all the common variables what we are studying in order to understand the pathophysiology or normal physiology. We are not supposed to identify some intermediate variable which is generated by the intermediate components of the systems, which is not possible. So if we develop the mathematical model for the organ, even with the minute organ components outputs can be can be studied. So in that way, the models are very much useful for studying the intermediate variables. And the second thing is explore the interaction physiology. Not like our engineering system. This human system has lot of interactions. That too, based on the situation, the interaction between the organs will vary. Suppose if you want to study the cardiovascular system, without the help of respiratory system or neural system, we cannot understand the cardiovascular physiology. So the interaction between the cardiovascular system, respiratory system, nervous system will give the whole picture about the cardiovascular system, because they are highly correlated with each other. So this interaction study can be explored very well with the help of this mathematical models. Okay. And then the next condition, pathophysiology. Pathophysiology, suppose actually the medical students are doing the final year, they are doing the house surgeon. Actually, the aim of this house surgeon is to have the hands-on training with the patients, and also they should have a practical knowledge about the various diseases, how this diseases influences the various systems of our body, what are the symptoms, how we can identify the disease. That is what the aim of the final year of all MBBS students. Suppose in that duration, if the physician is not able to face certain diseases, then they can do some simulation kind of things with their model. They can simulate any type of pathophysiology. They can understand its consequences with the model. Okay, so simulating any type of pathophysiology is very, very important application of mathematical model. So next important application is diagnostic procedures. We can come up with a different diagnostic procedure. For example, if you want to identify the activity of heart, always we are going for ECG or echocardiogram or any type of scanning methodologies. But using these models, we can come up with a lot of non-invasive diagnostic procedures and non-invasive diagnostic parameters which can convey the information about the diseased conditions more clearly than the gold standards. That is what the benefit of mathematical model. Usually the mathematical model act as a tool to explore the pathology, tool to simulate all types of diseases. Okay. So these are the benefits of mathematical models. And apart from that, according the performance of mathematical models, we can give the benefits or advantages of mathematical models as it can give very precise and concise results compared to experimental models. So experimental models, it's a practical, but mathematical models are ideal models. So ideal models, definitely the errors or other deviations will be very minimum. So we can go for mathematical model while exploring the fundamentals. And also we are going to use computers. Nowadays the computational efficiency of the computers are very high. So we can have a very millisecond or microsecond level simulations using this mathematical model, which can explore further very finite information related to our whole body. And then reusability. Once the model is developed for some purpose, actually the model development starts with some objective only. Even though it is started with a certain objective, it can be used or it can be reused for different conditions with the same model. We can use the same model with different conditions also. And also decision making, because it's precise and concise results, the decision making based on these results will be very useful both in diagnosis and therapeutic applications. And we are going to utilize the already existing formulae because the mathematical field is also very well explored. So we can use that models. Am I audible to you? Am I connected to all of you? Any one of
Yes,
you, please?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
If there is any disturbance, kindly interfere me and try to convey it, please.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay. So there are a lot of mathematical tools available, lot of mathematical methodologies available to model or to write the equations for linear and non-linear systems. So we can utilize that opportunity for exploring the physiological parameters. Okay. Next we can go for classification. So there are a lot of classifications available in mathematical modeling or computational physiology based on the performance, based on the nature of the equations what we are using. So I have given certain classifications. We cannot restrict the classifications only with this examples. Still there are a lot of classifications available. I can say it as static and dynamic. You are all aware of it. What is static system, what is dynamic system, linear, non-linear, explicit, implicit. So the explicit implicit is a very essential concept, because for developing any model we should have some prior knowledge about the system. It may be a real-time engineering model or physiological model. Before developing the model, we should have some prior knowledge about that particular system. Then only we can develop the model. Okay, so in that way I can classify models as a black box model, white box model and gray box model. Depends upon the how much information is available about the model. If we don't have any information, internal information about the model, only we have input and output information, then it is called a black box model. Okay, then gray box model, little more about input and output. Suppose the minimum information about internal parameters, then it is gray box. Suppose we have complete information about internal as well as input output, then we can go for a white box. Actually the physiological system, it is already explored very well. 90% of the physiological concepts has been already explored through experimental procedures. So it is we can go with the white box model itself. Okay, and then deterministic and probabilistic. Suppose the model the model performs or model give responses for the same input constantly, means all the time. If you are giving the same input, it will behave in a same manner, means then it is called as deterministic. Sometimes we can develop a model, probabilistic kind of model. It depends upon the situation it will behave. So it is very much useful for our physiological model. We cannot expect the same type of physiological response in all circumstances. So we cannot go for a deterministic, we can go for stochastic models also. And then discrete and continuous depends upon the nature of the equation what we are going to utilize. We can classify it as discrete and continuous. And final one is deductive and inductive, whether it is giving some decisions. So based on the input and output conditions or internal conditions, then it will be classified as this kind of models. Okay. The next thing is analogous models. Analogous models, if we consider our body, the body has different systems. Already I told you the vital organelle systems are cardiovascular system, respiratory system, nervous system. If we consider these three systems, cardiovascular system are handling the blood. So we can equate, or we can consider this as if we consider this as an engineering system, it mimics the hydraulic system, because we are talking about fluids, blood and body fluids. So it is a hydraulic system. If I am taking respiratory system, it deals with all gases, O2, CO2, atmospheric air. So we can equate this as an engineering pneumatic system. And then suppose if you are considering body temperature, if there is any temperature changes in our bodies, which is nothing but thermal models. Suppose if you are considering our nervous system, it is just transmitting the information or nervous impulses from one point to brain, and again it does the same job from brain to organelles. So this is like a transmission models. So if we want to connect these model, all are, one is hydraulic in nature, another one is pneumatic in nature, another one is thermal in nature. Suppose if we want to represent all this organelle system in a common platform, then we can go for a electrical analogous representation. Because we are all engineers, We know simple current voltage law and how the resistance works, capacitance works, everything. So we can biomedical engineers are the engineers who can connect engineering field with medical field. So we are all well versed in electrical systems. So we can represent the hydraulic system, pneumatic system, thermal system in electrical language or electrical equations. So this electrical analogy is very, very important, which has the capacity of represent all type of systems available in our body. Given some examples for analogous system. Our cardiovascular system is equivalent of our hydraulic system, and respiratory system is equivalent of pneumatic system, and nervous system is equivalent of transmission system. So this is how we can correlate, how we can identify our body as a engineering system, how we can correlate with it. So this we can do it for all the organs. Okay. So in that way, we should have some prior knowledge how to represent our physiological systems in engineering field. That is very, very essential knowledge for developing models for any organelle systems. Very important one is lumped and distributed models, physiological computational models. So lumped parametric model and distributed parametric model. I have given one real-time example with orange fruits. Some network people may be available. They know very well about this lumped parametric model and distributed parametric model, which is applicable to physiological modeling also. So the lumped parametric modeling, we are combining more than one segments lumped together and considered as a single unit. So if you are considering the orange fruit, it has a lot of internal components also, but we are considering it is all together under one single fruit. So which can be whose segment can be separated further. It is called for simplification purpose. We are combining all the internal elements of the orange and we are representing it as a single fruit, like that. In physiology also, the second image shows you the physiological representation of lumped parametric model. I am considering here as a heart as a whole system, but heart has lot of internal components. It has all 4 chambers, all 4 valves, and also vessels, a septum, pericardium. It has lot of components. I am considering it as a whole organ. This is called lumped parametric representation. Why we are going for lumped parametric representation? All this unit can be represented with a simplified one-dimensional equations. So solving one-dimensional equation is somewhat easier compared to partial differential equation. So only for simplification purpose we are going for lumped parametric model. And the next one is distributed parametric model. Excuse me. So distributed parametric model, each and every element of the system will be represented with some equivalent elements. There is no further segmentation is possible, then it is called as a distributed parameter. You can see a banana which cannot be divided further. It has a single unit which has unique characteristics. So in that way, we can represent our heart also. Each and every important anatomical locations are represented here. In that method, we are using partial differential equations. So solving partial differential equation is somewhat complicated than one-dimensional equation. So most of the physiological modeling, they will utilize only one-dimensional equations with this lumped parametric models. So this shows you the stages of developing the computational model, how we have to develop computational models step by step. First thing is we have to define the problem clearly. Problem definition is very, very important in modeling procedures, because based on the objective only we are going to develop the model. The model exact representation of any real world system is highly impossible. Okay, so we have to have some assumptions, some abstract informations. So real-time problem definition is the first stage. Okay, so define questions of interest. Suppose if you are taking a cardiovascular model, my aim is to simulate, or my aim is to study the valvular pathology. So if you are fixing like that, so the first you fix your objective. So based on that, you have to go for the further steps. The next one is identify variables and parameters. So for studying the valvular diseases, first we have to develop the model of a cardiovascular system. So then you have to explore what are all the variables related to cardiovascular system. So this is a cardiovascular system means we have volume, pressure. So like that we have to fix the variables as well as the parameters which affects the performance of the cardiovascular system, that has to be identified. So this is these two stages are called as defining a problem. We can apply these steps for any of the models. Okay, not only for cardiovascular model development, we can apply it for any model development. And the next stage is translation. Translation, so first we have to identify the governing principle. So every system will have its own behavior. So based on that behavior, we have to come up with some, there are a lot of principles defining the behavior of each and every organelle system that we have to first identify. And then make simplifying assumptions. Suppose if I am very much interested in valvular diseases, then we can simplify the coronary artery or systemic artery, which is less important according to my objective. So my objective is focusing on only the valvular diseases. Then I can approximate, I can have some assumptions in order to simplify the remaining organs or remaining components of the cardiovascular system. That means make simplifications by doing some assumptions. And then finally write the equations for defining the activity or defining the physiology of each and every organs. That is very, very important. We have to go for linear equations or non-linear equations. Actually our organs are very non-linear naturally. So we have to have at least some extent, we have to have non-linear equations. Then only we can exactly mimic the behavior of any organ. So if we develop the equations, then it is called as, the equations are nothing but the mathematical models. Okay, the interdependence of the equations will give the clear picture about the model of the particular organ. So we have translated the real world problem into a mathematical model, and then we are going to simulate that model in order to analyze whether it can produce the exact information what an organ can produce. Okay, that phase is called as analyze. So for that phase we need the solution for this mathematical equations. So first we have to fix a mathematical tool which is suitable for solving your own equations. There are lots and lots of mathematical tools available. So based on your own equations, you have to choose the model. Okay, you have to choose the tool. So with that tool, you can solve the equations. The equation solution will give some parameter or estimated values. Okay, so that estimated values has to be validated. Validated means we are already having certain experimental. So for even I am developing the model for valvular diseases, first I have to validate my model whether it can produce normal physiological parameters. Then only we can simulate any diseased pathophysiology conditions. Okay, there are a lot of experimental evidences available. There are a lot of literature informations and book informations available. So we have to simulate, or we have to correlate our own results with the literature results in order to validate our solutions. The last one is interpretation. Interpretation mainly based on the visualization. So we have to plot the results which what we have obtained by solving the mathematical equations. So quantitatively or qualitatively matching this equation results with the real world experimental data, we can come up the particular model is suitable to create diseased condition further. Okay, that is what interpretation phase. So in this phase we have developed our own model. We have to consult with the physicians because they are going to utilize this model. They have certain ideology. So we have to compromise the physicians also to justify our model is suitable for developing the or simulating the disease, the condition of the particular organ. So in that way, we can develop our computational models. So I have taken one example model, that is cardiovascular model. So before developing the cardiovascular model, you should have some basic knowledge about anatomy and physiology of the cardiovascular system. So anatomy is nothing but the structural information, physiology is functional information. So we should have some prior knowledge about structural and functional information of cardiovascular system. So I have given only 2 slides to give the abstract information about anatomy and physiology. This is the network which connects the anatomical locations of our cardiovascular system, and how the pure and the impure bloods are collected and pumped by the heart to different organs. That is shown here. I'll later explain all these things when I'm showing my own cardiovascular system model. You should know the path of the blood flow. See, if we start from the right atrium, so right atrium is the collection part. It collects the impure blood from superior and inferior vena cava, and this blood is pumped to right ventricle through the tricuspid valve, and the right ventricle pumps the impure blood to pulmonary circulation. The pulmonary circulation, where the impure blood is purified with the help of a gas diffusion in the lung part, and a pure blood is again pumped to the pulmonary veins, and it is collected at the left atrium. So left atrium to left ventricle, we have one valve, that is bicuspid valve, and left ventricle is the effective chamber. It pumps the blood to various parts of our body. So it maintains the pressure throughout the body. The pumping is done through the aortic valve. So the aortic valve is available at the entrance of the aorta, which is so if we consider the physiology of heart, the left side of the heart is more important than the right side of the heart. So the left ventricle, aorta, mitral valve and aortic valves are much important compared to right side, because they are maintaining the pressure throughout the body. So this little anatomy and physiology information is enough. Suppose if you are going for the modeling, first you have to fix what are all the components we are going to represent in our model. So I am going to show one cardiovascular model. In that model, I have considered these important factors. The first one is all 4 heart chambers. We can consider there are a lot of cardiovascular models available. They will consider the heart as a single chamber, because left ventricle alone they will consider. In my model, I have considered all 4 chambers: the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium and left ventricle. All 4 cardiovascular valves: tricuspid, pulmonary, mitral and aortic valves. And apart from that, there are 2 different important anatomical elements in our heart. One is septum, another one is pericardium. You know, the septum is the separating wall of the right heart and left heart. So the septum acts as a diaphragm. It is a dynamic unit. It is not a rigid valve. It is a flexible unit. Based on the pressure difference between the right heart and left heart, the septum will slightly deflect towards the less pressure chamber. Okay. So this the part of the septum is very, very important if you want to simulate the physiology of heart accurately. So I have considered the septum also. And the next one is the pericardium. Pericardium is the outer sac of the heart. If we consider the sac, it will be available inside the pericardium. The pericardium has some fluid that is called as pericardial fluid. So the pericardial fluid plays vital role in heart dynamics, because during the expansion and during the contraction, it acts as a lubricant, as well as it restricts the heart to expand further. The collapsing of the heart will be restricted by the pericardial sac only. So this is also one of the important part we have to consider. Another one, you know, we can classify the circulation in three different parts: pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation, and coronary circulation. So in our model, we are not model the coronary circulation. We are very much considering the pulmonary circulation as well as the systemic circulation. Okay, then if we consider the physiology, heart has two different activities. One is electrical activity, another one is mechanical activity. Electrical activity is the base for initiating the mechanical activity. Actually, the mechanical activity is the effective activity of the heart, because it will do the pumping and maintenance of pressure. But the electrical activity initiates the rhythmic mechanical activity. The phase or rhythm of the mechanical activity is maintained by the electrical activity. Okay, here most of the model, they are integrating, few models they are integrating the electrical activities as well as the mechanical activity. But in our model, we are consider only the mechanical activity. So we try to simulate the pressure, volume and flow nature of the heart activity as well as the cardiovascular system activity. Okay, so electrical activities are not considered here in our model. And the next step is how we are going to approach, how we are systematically developing the lumped parametric model of the cardiovascular system. We are considering it as a compartment. If we take a section of a vessel, so the vessel is nothing but fluid flowing tube. Okay, it has an inlet pressure, outlet pressure. It will permit the fluid flow. It has some capacity to store the blood. These are so volume, capacity, resistance to it can offer some resistance to flow. So these are the fundamental parameters related to mechanical activity of the heart: resistance, capacitance, flow, pressure and volume. So we have equivalent quantity in electrical representation also. Suppose if we consider the flow rate, which is nothing but current. Current is the flowing parameter of electrical network. If we consider volume, charge is the equivalent quantity of volume. Pressure drop, potential drop. So one-to-one mapping of all this mechanical parameters into electrical parameter is possible. So with that only we are going to represent our model. Okay, so this is our simple compartmental model. Compartmental model means I can take heart as one compartment. It has, otherwise I can take a right atrium as single compartment. It has some inflow, okay, through the venous return, and it has the outflow through the valve, okay, tricuspid valve. So in that way, each and every segment of the cardiovascular system can be considered as a compartment. Okay. So the Win Kessel is the scientist who developed the mathematical model or computational physiological model to understand the basic physiology of human being. So he represented our whole system, cardiovascular system, with two elements initially, that is resistance and capacitance. If we take as a segment of vessel, it has the capacity to store a little bit of fluid, even it is a flowing nature. Okay, the fluid is, there is a silent laminar fluid in our vessels that can be represented. The vessel can be represented as a capacitance, and it offers some resistance to the outflow, which is represented here as resistance. So the simplified model with the two elements, and he tried to expand this model with the representation of inlet flow resistance also. So he included one more resistance in the inlet flow, and then another inertial force. Inertial force is very, very important if you are considering any fluid flow. So he included one more element. So if we want to exactly represent any real-time model, we have to increase the number of elements in order to address each and every physical property of the particular organ. So that's why initially he started with the 2-element representation, and he come up with the 4-element representation, because this 4-element representation is giving more accurate or more exact representation of any natural system. Okay, so even before with that steps, we have to formulate the model with the initial hypothesis. The hypothesis is very much important, because with that hypothesis only we have to develop a model, and finally we have to test the hypothesis whether this model is addressing the particular hypothesis or not. That is very, very important. So our model has been developed with the hypothesis of finding the quantitative evidence for our alternate medicine. Actually, alternate medicine, Indians are very, in ancient days, Indians are very well aware of this alternate medicine like Siddha, Ayurveda, even the yogic procedures. So there are a lot of disease diagnosis procedure with this alternate medicine, and they have a treatment procedure also. Only nowadays the people are not accepting this alternating medicine principles because they have very poor quantitative evidences. They are having very poor scientific evidences. Our model has been developed in order to give quantitative and qualitative evidences to this alternate medicine principles. So alternate medicine principle, not like this allopathy principle, they'll have, if nowadays we can see a lot of specialization. Each and every part of our organ has a specialization. They have a dentist, endocrinologist, everything. But in alternate medicine, we have only Siddha doctor. He will consider the whole body as a single system, not like this allopathy medicine. They will consider each organ as a separate system, but in alternate medicine they will consider the whole body as a single system. If there is any changes, they will do only the pulse examination. They will do the radial artery pulse. They will check your radial artery, and from that pulse itself they can identify different diseases related to different organs, because they are considering body as a whole system. If there is any deviation in any one of the system, that will be reflected in all other systems. So even our kidney has some problem, it will be reflected in our cardiovascular system. By simply examining this radial artery pulse, they can identify, okay, your kidney has some problem. So I will suggest some recovery procedures or recovery tablets for you. So our model has the holistic aim of giving qualitative and quantitative evidence for Siddha and Ayurvedic principles. Okay, this is our whole model, electrical network. We have converted the whole human cardiovascular system as an electrical network. Okay, so if we consider this model, it starts, we can have a look into this, the one part one. It is a one numerical number is given here, 1. It starts with the venous return. So venous return, venous circulation has been here represented with 3 different elements. One is CV, LV and RV. Okay, so 3 elements representing the venous return. And then this next part is the fourth part is for venous. In venous return also we have major vessels as well as the capillary vessels. So we have represented major vessels as well as the capillary vessel. Then it will be this ERA is the very, very important unit. That is nothing but right atrium. Right atrium is represented with a capacitor. Capacitor here is we are using the elastance, the term elastance. Elastance is reciprocal of capacitance, because the capacity of each and every chamber depends upon the elastic nature of the heart tissue, how it can easily expand and contract. So we are considering it as a elastance. So we are representing the right atrium with a variable elastance. So because the elastic nature of the right atrium varies according to diastolic and systolic phase. So we are considering it as a variable elastance. And one more unit is they represented here, and that is like more or less the same as resistance, but it has something different from ordinary resistance, because in the next stage is the valve representation. So it is not a SRA, is not a constant resistance, it is a variable resistance which has the relationship with pressure. Okay, in electrical system we have a single resistance or variable resistance that depends upon certain parameters. Like that here also we are using variable resistor to represent the variable resistive nature of the right atrium. And then 3 elements, TV, LTV, VTV and RTV. So these 3 elements represents the tricuspid valve. Each and every valve is represented with 3 different elements. The next to it we have a pulmonary valve. Before this pulmonary valve we have right ventricle. So right ventricle pumps the blood to the pulmonary valve to the pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation we have two major representation. One is pulmonary artery, another one is pulmonary capillary. So each and every vessel segments are represented by 3 different elements: capacitance, resistance and inductance. Okay, so in that way the whole heart, if we consider this right side has we have 2 chambers and left side we have 2 chambers. So both these chambers are connected together and it is connected with a pericardial PPC. Here PPC is nothing but the pericardial pressure. It offers some pressure, variable pressure, which is represented here, pericardium representation. All this unit is controlled by PIT. This PIT is nothing but the intrathoracic pressure. Intrathoracic pressure, our whole heart and respiratory systems are in the thoracic cavity. So the thoracic cavity is experiencing some negative pressure, that is nothing but intrathoracic pressure. So that intrathoracic pressure is also a very, very important element which is to be modeled when we are modeling the cardiovascular system, because it gives the correlation between the respiratory system as well as the cardiovascular system, because the intrathoracic pressure is the main source for initiating our respiratory process. So that will be incorporated here. So I hope you have some basic information about this cardiovascular system. We have modeled all four chambers, 4 vessels, pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation, and then pericardium pressure as well as the intrathoracic pressure. The septum unit is here represented with the variable resistance, which is represented as SRA, SB, like that. Okay. In order to introduce the neural influence in the cardiovascular system, simple neural influence, that is baroreceptors. Baroreceptors are the sensors which can sense the instantaneous pressure of our blood, because we are trying to model the hemodynamic parameters. So hemodynamic, one of the very important hemodynamic parameter is pressure. So we have to incorporate the controlling structure of the pressure with the help of baroreceptors. So in our body we have different baroreceptors. It is available in the aortic arch as well as the carotid sinus. So they are just like our engineering pressure sensors. It will sense the pressure if there is, our brain has some set value. So if it exceeds or decreases with the same compared to the set value, it will initiate 2 different effective response, that is sympathetic and parasympathetic responses. So based on that sympathetic and parasympathetic responses, either heart rate or cardiac contractility or peripheral resistance value will be altered, which will have the major influence in the hemodynamic. It will increase the blood pressure or decrease the blood pressure based on the set value or based on the error value, whether the error is positive error or negative error, or the instantaneous pressure is higher than the set value or lesser than the set value. This is like our simple closed loop system, engineering closed loop system. It works. So that also we incorporated in our model. And second one is the next important interaction is respiratory interaction, because even though we are studying the hemodynamics of respiration, heart and lungs are situated in the same thoracic cavity. So I already discussed to you, it is a pleural space. The pleural space consists of some negative pressure, which has the influence on both lungs activity as well as the heart activity. So in order to incorporate the respiratory system influences in cardiovascular system, this intrathoracic pressure is also considered here. So the intrathoracic pressure sinusoidally changes according to inhalation and exhalation phases, which is incorporated in our cardiovascular model. Okay, so power, it is a electrical network. Definitely we should have some power to operate. So here the time varying elastance act as a power. I already discussed to you, the heart has two different activity. One is electrical activity, mechanical activity. In order to initiate the mechanical activity, we need a electrical activity. So the electrical activity here indirectly or here explicitly incorporated in this model by varying the elastance. It is rhythmically varies according to our heart rate. Suppose the nominal heart rate is 70 to 75 beats per minute. This time varying elastance also varies with the same phase. So this is the power source for the whole model. By solving this equation, we are getting the variable elastance curves. And the hemodynamics, the segment of the vessel, it is considered here as an engineering segment. So you are all know how to write the voltage equations and current equations. So we have written the current equations, voltage equations and flow equations. After writing the equations related to each and every anatomical part of our model, we try to solve that equations using numerical methods, numerical solution method with the help of MATLAB. So these are the some of the plots what we have obtained, what we have simulated from our model. So without human being, without any experimental data, we have simulated the cardiac cycles, how the elastance of different heart chambers varies, how the pressure of our left ventricle, the left ventricle, left atrium, right ventricle, everything, each and every part of the cardiovascular system pressure changes, volume changes, flow changes can be simulated with this model. Okay, the model parameters, suppose if we consider this model diagram, it has some numerical values that is called as parameters. So fixing the parameters is the very important procedure, because these parameters are derived from already reported literature experimental procedures. So the experimental procedures, they have quantified what is the resistance of each and every anatomical locations that we have incorporated in our model. So in this way, to validate whether my model is working perfectly, I have simulated my pressure volume loop. So pressure volume loop, it is exactly mimicking the natural heart functioning, that is MB. There are some significant physiological events we can identify, that is how this MB mitral valve closes, diastolic filling, mitral valve opens, and isovolumetric contraction. Isovolumetric contraction means without changing the volume, we are increasing the pressure alone. All the significant physiological events can be simulated with our model. So in that way only I can claim my model is having the ability of simulating normal physiology. Okay. So apart from that, this model has a lot of all four cardiovascular valves also. So the gold standard procedure to identify the valve dynamics is the echocardiogram. So this left side diagram image shows you the echocardiogram, which is exactly replicated in the model simulated graph also. Here I have taken the mitral valve and aortic valve. Here the aortic valve flow is giving negative peak in echocardiogram. Actually it is a positive peak because of the placement of the what I can say, placement of the probe in while examining the echocardiograph. It gives the reverse values, but it is not in the case of our model. It gives the exact ejection of our aortic valve. And this is mitral valve. The significant phases of mitral valves are E peak and A peak. It is clearly simulated by our model also. So apart from this valves, we have a pulmonary circulation pressure graphs as well as the flow graphs and aortic systemic circulation flow patterns also. And the one more important factor of modeling the cardiovascular system is to study the interaction physiology. So here we try to simulate how this breathing pattern influences our systemic pulse. We can say it as a radial artery pulse, because our aim is to give some experimental evidence or scientific evidences for the alternate medicine factors. So alternate medicine, they will always examine the radial artery. How radial artery is the parameter related to cardiovascular system, how it can reflect the respiratory influences. Here it is simulated. Respiratory graph, it is just like our sinusoidal graph. If you see the envelope of the radial artery pulse, which is given here, it is sinusoidally slightly increasing and decreasing. This shows you the influence of breathing on the cardiovascular system. And also we have performed some, we can perform certain specific procedures also. That is like your Ayurvedic procedures or your yoga procedures can be performed, and the same condition can be simulated with the model also. Here one Valsalva maneuver procedure is here given here. We can perform this one either in the sitting manner or in the lying condition. Take a breath and hold the breath for some time, and we try to breathe out forcefully by closing the nose, okay, through the mouth. This is called Valsalva maneuver. It is a very, very important procedure when we are studying the interaction between the cardiovascular system and respiratory system. So we have performed the Valsalva maneuver with our model. That is for how we can implicate the same condition in our model. We have to modulate the intrathoracic pressure. All this procedure will alter the intrathoracic pressure only. So we are trying to modulate the intrathoracic pressure according to the phases of the Valsalva maneuver. So which is reflected in the radial artery pulse explicitly. It has 4 different phases. The same 4 different phases are reflected in our radial artery pulse pattern also. We have first phase, second phase, breathing phase, holding phase, and also forcefully we are removing the air from our lungs through the mouth. Everything is reflected in our radial artery pulse, which is a parameter or which is a variable of cardiovascular system. Okay, and then valve dynamics I already discussed. We can simulate all the valve hemodynamics and valve pathophysiology also. So pathophysiology, if we consider valve, there are 2 different important pathophysiology. One is stenotic condition, other one is regurgitation condition. Stenotic condition means the valve cannot open completely. 100% opening is expected. Due to any deposition or due to any malfunctioning of the valves, they are not able to open completely. That condition is called as stenotic conditions. Another one is regurgitation. Always we are in our heart valve, only forward flow is possible. If we consider the mitral valve, which is available in between the right atrium and the right ventricle, always the mitral valve should facilitate the blood flow from right atrium to right ventricle. There should not be any backflow from ventricle to atrium. If there is any malfunctioning of the valve happens, it will allow some backflow. That condition is called as regurgitation, which is usually examined with the help of echocardiogram. So we can simulate this regurgitation condition as well as the mitral stenotic condition. This shows you the mitral valve stenotic condition. If we consider the normal physiology, the E peak is higher compared to A peak. If it is stenotic condition, E peak is less than the A peak. So by that way, we can consider this pathophysiology. And here also, if it is a completely normal mitral valve, it will allow only forward flow. There is no reverse flow, which is denoted here with the letters RF. Okay, if there is any regurgitative status, it will allow the we can modify our own parameters in order to simulate this diseased conditions. Normal parameters should be tuned to represent this pathophysiology condition also. So like that we have simulated all valvular physiology. Okay, so with this information, I hope you all understand some basic about the computational model, how they are useful for simulating this is very limited example I have given here. We can generate a whole lot of diseases, whatever may be the disease, simply tune the parameter which is mimicking or which is affected by the particular disease. That is enough for simulating the diseased condition or pathophysiological conditions. Okay, so this mathematical models are very well useful for diagnosis. In my model, I can simulate any disease, heart disease, valvular disease, aging diseases. Aging diseases, here we have taken the elastance. Elasticity of the tissue will varies according to aging. So we can simulate the aging disease also. Any hemodynamic disorders, if there is any orthoclerostic conditions, any depositions in the artery, any plaque formation in the artery, that can be also simulated with this model. And fluid derangement. Fluid is here, our body has lot of fluids. Blood is the main fluid. If there is any unequal distribution of the blood flow due to necrosis conditions or any other conditions, ischemia condition, that can be also modeled with this one. And also if we have a coronary representation in my model, we can develop the coronary diseases as well as artery diseases, and also interactive physiology. The one more very important use of this one is patient specific modeling. So this model is developed for a young healthy adult. So the parameters are most of the parameters are matching with a young healthy adult. Suppose if we want to create a model with a patient specific, then we have to extract the parameters from the particular patient and we have to incorporate, because one simple example is here in cardiac cycle, I have considered 70 beats per minute. It is a healthy value. Suppose the patient is having only 50 beats per minute, means then we have to derive the cardiac duration for the particular heart rate, and that can be incorporated here. That is called as patient specific. Some parameter can be measured from the patient, which can be incorporated in the model in order to simulate patient specific hemodynamics changes. So these are the uses of the mathematical model in diagnosis as well as therapeutic point of view. Even it can mimic our own real physiological systems as well as organs. They are having certain disadvantages, because these are all ideal cases. We cannot, God is a very good engineer. He made this whole body with a lot of interactive physiologies. Okay, all the time our body will not work similarly. So we cannot guess the physiological consequences for the abnormal conditions. So definitely the models are ideal cases which cannot mimic the real case of our body, but still they are having certain disadvantages. Okay, all the model which are developed as objective based, based on your type of study, you are going to model it. Other parts of the human body will be approximated, or they can be considered as these factors cannot be considered for modeling it. So it is a objective based model. And the second one is abstract representation. Most of the minute informations cannot be represented, so we will make a assumption and make it as a constant one. And parameter values are very, very important, because in India this physiological modeling work is not started by any of the laboratories. Only in IIT Madras, under the guidance of Manivannan, Dr. Manivannan, 2-3 students are doing this physiological modeling part, because all the parameters related to our physiological modelings are derived from foreign patients database. There is no database available for Indians. Okay, so because all our human activities are based on the regional environmental factors also, which cannot be incorporated in our model. That needs a lot of parametric validation and parametric collections. For that we have to perform lot of experimental procedures, which is lacking in India. That's why this field is not well explored in India. And also, apart from physiological parameter, there are a lot of psychological parameters are also influencing the performance of any human system, which is not considered in our model. Most of the model, they are doing physiological approximation only, not psychophysiology. It is a emerging field. You can do lot of research in the psychophysiological modeling also. And computational efficiency. So of course today the computer field is very well developed. We can have a very accurate and very high resolution solutions from these models. And also suppose if you are going for very minute variables, it is a time taking process for solving these equations. So computational efficiency is a very important one. And final thing is experimental data validation. Even though we are getting lot of intermediate variables, validating that variables needs experimental procedures which are not available extensively. Okay, these are the limitations. So with that one, I'll close my presentation. If you are having any queries, you can ask me. Hello, ma'am. Hello. Hello. Hello, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any queries that people
Yes.
can ask?
Participants, if you have any queries, please. You can unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can put it in the chat box. Participants?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for very nice presentation. So, as per your experience, which kind of human body part, like lungs, like heart or any other, it's become difficult to model, or even after computationally modeling it, its performance is not matching to the real world kind of mechanism of that organ.
Okay, thanks for your question, sir. Actually, some basic performance or basic response of any organ can be modeled. You cannot say this is very difficult and that the organ is very difficult, like that we cannot say. Some basic information, basic performance of any organ can be modeled. The only thing is our body is a very, we cannot have a concrete information how our body will react to that particular situation, because all yogic procedure, our body has lot of internal curing capacity. It has lot of unknown mechanism inside our body that we cannot do it with a modeling procedure. Otherwise, all the organ fundamental parameters or fundamental responses can be modeled. We cannot say this cannot be modeled with this tool.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Madam, this is Professor Venkateswaran. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Madam, thank you so much for your participation in our FDP. We are very delighted to have you during this 3 days of our FDP, madam. Your talk was so inspirational to all people who would like to do, the computational models to be taken into all process of image processing and healthcare. Thank you so much, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Shall I leave the meeting, sir?
I hope if participants don't have any more questions, we can